Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Leverage Redemption. A great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, it's just great to be back in this world with these characters. I'm so excited, but it is kind of sad to start off with a bummer like that with the whole Sophie thing. I was curious how they were going to handle the whole Nate thing. I was wondering, they're just going to write it off like maybe things between him and Sophie didn't work out and maybe he's not there anymore, but it's like, no, he died. Which is sad, but I think I'm actually happier about that because at least it's like things worked out for him. It's not like things kind of blew up. It's like, no, they were together, and it's like, I was curious whether they were going to answer what happened. I didn't know if it was going to be a bigger plot point or not, but it's like, no. Basically, he ran hot for so long, like that anger in his family and stuff like that. For him, it's like he let it go, but it was already too late. He ran hot for so long, like he burned so much on the inside that basically his heart finally gave out from him is what it is. So it's sad, but Sophie says at the very least, despite everything, at least he burned. And I think it's like, I think how I interpret that line, and maybe I'm wrong for interpreting it this way, but I interpret it as because he burned the way he did, he was able to shine so bright to help so many people. So at least he burned. It's not like he burned so passionately and so powerfully, and I think for someone like Sophie, I think that meant a lot in its own right. I think that the fact is that he did like that aspect about him, I think is what he had his ups and downs because of it, but I think it also, I don't know, I think it's one of the things she kind of liked about him, But obviously, like Hardison, Elliot, as well as Parker, trying to get in contact with her. And it's been a year. Like Nathan died a year ago, so but they had 7 years together. And that's something. I think that's at least they had that. Obviously we catch it, moving past kind of the sad stuff, because obviously it's going to be a theme throughout this. And I'm curious, are they going to set Sophie up to kind of she kind of plays the role a little bit of a Nathan, even though Parker was kind of set up to become the Nathan. They kind of kept it ambiguous in this episode on who's really kind of feeling the more, because that's the thing, there probably won't be anyone ever filling the role of the mastermind, because I think Parker's still just the thief. Granted, she's gotten a little bit of everything. She's gotten she's got the grifter, she's got the thief, she's got the mastermind part down, but I think that angle is going to be a more combined effort, because I think finding a mastermind, it's like no one has a mind like Nathan Ford, so it's replacing that. In her own right, Parker does. Granted, her mind doesn't work the exact way Nathan's does, but but I think, I don't know. We didn't see Parker kind of doing the Nathan thing necessarily. I think it was more so because Sophie needed to take over. And I think that speaks volumes for Parker too, because at one point, you had Elliot try to step in, but Parker was like, no, she's Sophie Devereaux. She's got it. That's a thing of no, let her do this. She needs to do this. Don't step in. Let Sophie spread her wings. She hasn't been on the grift. Her and Nate called it quits 8 years ago. So, but, catching up with everybody, I actually, because I think I brought it up during the teaser trailer, I thought maybe they did kind of a similar thing to, Person of Interest, where they kind of set it up at the end, Person of Interest kind of goes a little, there are multiple teams, not just one. That's what I was wondering. I think I brought that up during my teaser trailer discussion. I could be mistaken. But, I'd completely forgotten until I rewatched the entire series, because that's why I'm starting on this so late, because it just took me this long, because I waited sadly to the last second to rewatch the show, because I had not rewatched Leverage in years. I've seen the show. This was my third time seeing the show all the way through. The first time I rewatched it was a couple years ago, so it was not fresh in my mind. Regardless, my point was I completely forgot they set up at the end we're going to go international because of the black book they got from Interpol. So I'd completely forgotten they'd already set up Leverage is going to go international. But it's interesting hearing from them, like, oh yeah, like they don't lead the charge, like they oversee some of the teams and stuff like that, but other people around the world, so they don't really do the hands-on stuff as much. It's kind of up to they kind of just like guide the other teams that are out there. So for Parker, it's like she hasn't been in a bit in years, and Harson's like, that's why I built you bits and stuff like that. She's like, yeah, but different bits. I know those bits so well. And obviously Elliot's running a whole bunch of food trucks. It's because to help people from the who are looking for jobs after they get out of the military. Like he wanted to be able to help them out, which that's always been something that's we've seen that showcased in Elliot's story in the past as well. So, but obviously they want to help Sophie because it's like, right, we need to get you back on it. Like, what's going to help you? Stealing something. And I'm like, it's so interesting because that's kind of where season 2 was, interestingly enough. I mean, to be fair, it's kind of like Nate bringing her onto the team, like, in season 1, but also in season 2 where it's just kind of they're all depressed. It's like, yeah, you took us and you broke us. And then it's like, you know what we should do? We should go steal something. And Sophie's like, yes! Wasn't it actually Parker who suggested that they go steal something too? Maybe that's supposed to be like a little wink and nod and homage to that, I think. And Nate was the one that was kind of like, no. So Sophie's kind of got that. So obviously I skipped over it a little bit, but I do like how the structure of the show was. Like he kind of got like kind of a flash of like what goes down in the episode, and then we kind of rewind that it's like, oh, 3 days earlier, and then we got the 6 months earlier, like when we get introduced to Harry. Now, I'm about to go on a huge tangent that I think is hilarious when you actually break it down. Obviously, Noah Wyle, one of the things I best know him for is the Librarians, the movies, and obviously, I only watched up to season 2. I need to circle back to the show at some point in time, but I know that he pops in and out of the show, at least the first season. I think from what I watched the second season the same way as well. Regardless, it's interesting because there's actually an episode of Leverage where one of the Librarian movies is playing on the TV. Now that's interesting because who's also in the Librarian TV show? Christian Kane, who plays Elliot. So technically that makes Leverage exist in a universe where the library movies take place. Because I know I say the word library wrong. I know it's library, but I always say library. It's just me. Maybe it's a southern thing. Maybe it's just a me thing. Whatever it is. I know that pissed someone off one time. I'll never forget how pissed someone got off because I say library like that. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Regardless, it's just interesting. It's like, it's a very I mean, to be fair, it's like Dean Devlin was behind the library show and the movies anyway. So like, but still, it's just interesting when you break that down, because that means like, it's like, oh, Harry just happens to look like Noah Wyle, who's the actor we know exists in this universe because of that. It's super meta and weird when you think about it, because it also means that, oh, there's an actor that looks like Elliot named Christian Kane. Like that's where my mind immediately went when I was rewatching the show. Regardless. But circling back, we were introduced to Harry, and he's a lawyer. And I was wondering what role he was coming into this. Like, Nate was coming from it from an insurance standpoint. I was curious what. I thought he was like a fixer, and I guess because that's the role he plays. He's going to be playing in the cons, going forward. But I thought that was I thought that was more so like what role he played. And I guess as a lawyer, he kind of played that role, so he's kind of bringing that over to the more crime for good, like the rest of the team. But it's interesting, which also like Reed Diamond, it's just like he just played a slimy dude in what was it, the final season of Bosch. So it was just interesting seeing him pop up like, oh, I literally just saw you play kind of a slimy character in Bosch, and now you're playing really a sociopath in this. What's his name, Fletcher? Like he's Maxwell, he's a complete and utter D-bag. But, yeah, like, Sophie's kind of listening in because Fletcher, like, he's got, like, a bad reputation because his company sells drugs, opioids that people got severely addicted to. So people don't even want his art in the museum, so they're kind of, like, boycotting that, like, outside. And Sophie, she's like, right, I haven't even been on a con, but everyone else kind of, like, scatters and does their own thing as they're kind of helping out, Sophie, like, oh, find something you want to steal. But then, like, she immediately picks up on the fact is that Harry's trying to steal the painting. She's like, oh, and it's like she's pointing it out, and like Parker's like, oh yeah, like the fact is the camera feed's been cut and stuff like that. Someone's going to use the fire alarm as an escape route, but it's like, yeah, someone's about to rob. You know, my psychologist said, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And even Sophie had to be, wait, psychologist, like, oh yeah, there's a psychologist because we helped out some abused kids a while back, so now she pays with her service. And it's like, wait, you go see a child psychologist, and Hardison's like, yeah, the puppet, and she's like, oh, angry, which I'm like, oh, that's funny because like one of the final cases, obviously, in the original show was related to a toy, and we got to look back on Parker, and like, oh, here's a doll about your feelings and stuff like that, and Parker was all about like anger and stuff like that, so I'm assuming it's kind of a wink and nod to that. But it's like, it's interesting to know that, Parker, once again, it's just like seeing that Parker still got her Parker-isms, but also like that you can see she's a little bit more well-adjusted, so that's just interesting though, and she actually has a psychologist. But then like, obviously it's like, all right guys, like the alarm goes down, the gates go down, and then Harry does his thing. He's trying to steal the painting, and Sophie's like, oh no. He's like, whoa, ma'am, this is what it looks like. She's like, it looks like you're trying to steal that Rembrandt. And he's like, no, go ahead. And he's like, really? Okay. And then it's like, he's like, who are you? And it's like, she's like, who are you? And then Parker stole his wallet. He's like, is that my wallet? And Parker's like, I hope it is. It's got all your credit cards in it. And like breaks down. I didn't even realize. I was curious, like, and it does sound like he is, Noah Wyle is doing kind of a New Orleans accent, And I love that whole bit. Just like, I love that. What is that? My wallet? Then is that my watch? It's like, that's Parker for you. Like, because like, it's like, honestly, they're like, oh, look at, like, Sophie was like, look at you. He's actually doing pretty good. Look, like, oh, just like, all right, he's stealing the painting and stuff like that. And Parker tried to stop him at one point. Sophie's like, Parker, if you do this, he has to learn if he doesn't do it himself. And it's like, what? There's like a weight situation with it. So it's like, all right, so what was the whole thing of like, no, see, he was doing so good. Hardison's like, no, he didn't. Don't lie, girl. Like, he's going away to jail for a long time. And obviously he had set up an exit, and he's like, oh, can I get my wallet? Oh, Parker already put it back. It's like, how did she do it? And so before you make the exit, your boy Elliot pops him, and it's like, okay. It's like, well, now we got to bring him. Elliot, get him. And I was like, all right, Hardison, you take that. He's like, you knocked him out. It's like, and then we get it, ladies and gentlemen. First episode. Damn it, Hardison. I'm like, oh, yes. Once again, I talked about it with the teaser trailer, like, I'm home. It's so good to hear that phrase again. But we learn more about Harry, once again, that he works with this terrible dude, Maxwell. But the fact is that he's the one that actually helped Maxwell. Like, it's like, he took pride in being like, yeah, I'm a lawyer, but I never take sides, which I'm like, I think that's kind of BS. As a lawyer, you automatically do take sides, like, because your job is to like defend your client and stuff like that. But for him, it's like, the fact is, it's like, oh, I'm helping you move money. It's like, that's definitely you choosing a side. But he had to justify it, make him feel like it wasn't as bad. So he ends up helping. It's like, right, you do this settlement because if you do this now, like, if you let things kind of play out, you're going to be spending tons and millions upon millions. Like for legal fees and stuff like that, with all the different people that are going to take you to court for, everything. Because it's like, he's like, no, like, just because it's not my fault my drugs are addicted. It's like, dude, there's literally a cartoon. You also talked about it with someone about how addicted this is. It's like, how'd you even get that? Don't worry about it. So it's kind of like, yeah, you're a scummy dude. And so when everything, he was basically trying to get him to settle with the clients, and he's like, right, I'll set aside like $100 million for you, and then you pay out a settlement to these people. So he's going to each and every one of them. It's like, okay, he's going to pay you a lot of money. He's like, oh, you lost a home, the bank's going to take your home because you had to pay for Cole to go to rehab. Don't worry, you have more than enough money to get your house back. He's like, you have my word. But when he goes back to Maxwell's like, no, actually, no. You've actually told me, actually laid it out for me accidentally, Harry, but inadvertently you gave me an idea of all I have to do is legally keep all these people in court and bury them under enough stuff that eventually they'll either quit or they'll die. So he's like, that way I get to keep more money and I get to keep, it's just, once again, it's just shows you how much of a sociopath he is. And that's why Harry did what he did. He wanted to give something back to the families. He's like, he made a promise. He gave their word. It's like, I'm the reason that he kind of inadvertently had the idea. So obviously the thing is they're going to run a con on him, sell him a fake painting, like a lost Rembrandt, and then when it gets revealed, because the whole thing for him isn't about the money, it's about the art, but it's also about his name. And I think that's an interesting thing too, because Elliot's the one that played part of that conversation. Nate taught him the whole aspect of like, right, that came up in the final season, like, rather than you telling me what that congressman wanted, you wanted me to figure it out on my own, so I thought that was pretty interesting. But obviously, it's like Hardison's got his whole setup now where it's like, right, we're doing this, we got to keep up like the day and age. So like, no just painting stuff hand, like, oh, like 3D printers are a thing now. So utilizing obviously more modern technology, because things have advanced a lot since the show's original run. And so I even love the little thing on the side, a picture of him as Bob Ross, and Elliot's like, really? And he's like, oh yes, sir, for real, Also, like, Elliot knowing, like, it's like, because Hardison made a reference to, like, Star Trek early on in this episode, and Elliot was like, only the evil ones, baby. He's like, why do I know that? Also, you got Parker on the grift, which she's like, nah, I've been like, I've been the roper for the past 8 years. It's like, right, of course you have been. And it's like, yeah, I haven't stabbed anyone in a long time, like over a month. I was about to say, like, oh, so you haven't stabbed anyone since, like, wasn't that season 1 when she stabbed home dude up with the fake adoption scams and stuff like that? But I was like, oh, she hasn't. It's like, well, she made a reference to, like, it's not, it means a lot when you're not the one doing the stabbing or something like that. So Sophie's just kind of like, okay. So once again, it feels good to see like the scam kind of play out. But once again, you can tell like Sophie is out of her element. Not only just because it's been a while since she's done it, but also it's like the last time she did any of this grifting, it was with Nate. And now that he's not going, like it hits you, Because it's just like, right, like the last, like, because you're always going to associate that, like, she hasn't done it in 8 years. And so, like, the last time she did do it was 8. So, obviously, it is going to tug at you a bit. I love the whole Hardison and Elliot thing of, like, getting the guy to clear the room and everything later on. And it's like, yeah, like, there's going to be enough PCI or pressure or whatever that could tear off, like, a baby's arm. And it's like, now Hart's like, now a baby or a toddler? He's like, maybe like a pre-K. And the guy's like, that's such a I forgot the exact wording he said, but it basically he's like, that's such a messed up metaphor. So once again, them doing their handshake too, I'm like, just showing you like how much that friendship has grown. But also Elliot wanting to be there for Sophie. It's like, right, if you want to ever talk about it, like, because we haven't talked. But he had referenced like, right, like we could have like kept one of the paintings, that would have been nice. And then like, Sophie's like, Nate never did nice, and it's like, just kind of a constant reminder of like not having him around, and even later on when the backstory for Elliot's character is like, oh, you're the son of like an Irish mobster. And he's like, I know, like, who you wrote this part for. But for her, like, that was also why she didn't want to talk about it. Because she's like, I am talking about it. Like, but I'm using this grift as a means of kind of, honoring Nate to a certain extent. So I thought that was kind of beautiful. That was her way of kind of paying homage or her memory of him in that regard. So I thought that was beautiful. But obviously, Harry did some digging into Nate himself when he saw Nate Ford's name, like obviously with like IYS and like some of the art that was there. It's like, I forgot what he was saying, like, oh, are these like, what was it, are these the really expensive one or something like that? And then Elliot and Harrison like, no, they'd be over there in that closet, stupid. But yeah, the whole plan was to get him to buy, once again, a fake painting and then just kind of end up ruining his name. That'd be the way they kind of make him pay. But sadly, things got found out because Elliot kind of got blown. It's like, right, like your face and stuff like that didn't bring up anything because this lady works for what was the Riz? Riz. It's a I ended up looking up her name from the IMDb, but it's like Bly is her name, and it seems like she's gonna. From what I was reading really quickly, like I didn't read spoilers or anything, but like her IMDb was kind of hinting like, oh yeah, like she's gonna be a recurring character. So I'm wondering if she's gonna be kind of like not a one for one, but I wonder if she's gonna be a little bit like the Italian, probably like probably a combination of like the Italian and Sterling, probably to a certain extent. But she immediately knew, it's like, right, my line of work, your face didn't like give any red flags, but like with my sector, I deal with violence. Not knowing Elliot Spencer is like not knowing a Rembrandt. And like Elliot was almost smiling like, oh, thanks for comparing me to that. And I love, they make sure to give Elliot his action scene, and I love it, and being like, I'm literally going to tell you what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it, and he did it. And he's like, yeah, it's a lot faster in real life, huh? And she's like, I'll be seeing you or seeing you around. So it's like, obviously that was, because it meant to be an audition for them. And she's like, the big guy, he's got promise. The rest of them, cut him. I'm like, freaking Elliot. 8 years ain't lost a step, But because also like mini Lucille and everything, that's so good. It's like, yeah, like it's because I was about to say like, oh, like they're using one of the food trucks as like, I was like, oh, is that supposed to be like the new Lucille? But it's like, no, like he's got food trucks all over the place. They can all service as right, we needed a whole van for Lucille. Now she can just be in the back of one of these trucks. She's a lot more portable, and everything. So, and I love that he does like an accent and stuff. He's like, oh my God, your accents have gotten better. He's like, my accents have always been good, right, babe? She's like, yeah, they have. I got to go do that thing. He's like, babe. And I was like, oh. It's like, yeah. Parker's not going to lie to you. I love that, though. I wonder if that's supposed to be like a little jab, like not necessarily like a little jab, but it's supposed to be like a little messing with the fact is that maybe even Aldous Hodge would be like, yeah, my accents weren't as good. I have definitely gotten better. I've grown as an actor, over these past couple of years. So even now I'm like, I can do accents better. Like I'm better like at it, I think that'd be interesting. Because you always just learn interesting things, like Beth, the actress who plays Parker, like, I was reading, like, some interesting trivia about, like, I know I'm going on these few tangents, but it's like, these are my only outlets to talk about this type of stuff, is I think I remember she was saying, like, she had no coordination as a kid or something like that. It was like a quote or something like that. I'm like, is that why? Like, oh, that's interesting. Like, potentially, I don't know if that, like, applies into her adulthood or not, but it's like, oh, that's interesting. You play, like, one of the most coordinated characters ever, the world-renowned thief Parker. So it's so interesting that, like, oh, I found that interesting when I was, like, rewatching the show, knowing that. I was like, oh, is that why, like, it makes her playing Parker that much more interesting, if that's, if that ends up really being the case. But regardless, but yeah, like, their covers were blown and everything. And obviously, I love that line from Harry, because Elliot was like, oh, like, did you sell that? He's like, no, I wanted to hurt him. He's like, I needed him to pay. There were those people will never, I can't find all the people who he screwed over. He's like, I need to make him pay. I need to take something from him. That anger in his voice. I'm like, wow. And I think in that moment, I was like, now that's very Nathan Ford of him, that anger of like, I want to take something from him. I want him to hurt, And so everything, him setting fire to the painting, and once again getting our classic leverage of it just, giving you that blue tinge on the scene as they reveal what really happened. And I love it. It's like Elliot being like, we need a plan M, and Hardison's like, no. Why does that have to be Plan M? You know how I feel about Plan M, and if you don't remember, and maybe you did, but I'm glad I rewatched the show to remember. Plan M is the one that always typically ends with Hardison dying. Not always, but a lot of the plans ended with Hardison, and I love that that's a tradition that they're keeping alive. It's like, dude, and so it's like, what was it, like Plan S, like Hardison still survives or something like that is what he was saying. So they ended up replacing the Rembrandt in the art museum with a fake, and that's the one Harry ended up burning. But they didn't just stop there to really screw him over. Like, they don't even need to be really good fakes. Let's just replace them all. And it's like, well, you would mean breaking into some of the like most secure museums around the world. And then Parker's shaking. I'm like, what's she shaking for? And then Hardison's like, okay, go ahead, babe. She's like, so many bags. I'm like, yeah. I'm happy because Parker's happy. So I love that. So I was almost hopeful that it ended up being the case, but Connie, the insurance lady, I was almost hoping, like, tell me you're from IYS. That'd be so interesting if you were really from IYS. That never came up, but I thought that'd be interesting. But yeah, because he, once again, scumbag motive, like, oh yeah, I'm going to pay this guy to put a bullet in you, and, oh, they're going to pay me, and then I'm going to sue the museum for them getting my work. Like, oh, I'm going to make a killing off him. I'm like, man, he's a true sociopath. But, yeah, everything, like, it's like, oh, I talked to someone on the phone about, the insurance payout, and I gave them access to the bank. Ooh, that wasn't you I talked to, Connie. I wasn't your insurance company, and they took everything. And obviously, Hardison was able to get some of the money from stuff they sold, plus from his bank accounts to give to his victims, but not all of them are, trackable. And Harry was like, wait, you couldn't find all of them? He's like, no, you thought you were just going to get done, like a one and done, you can walk away clean. No, you did a lot of bad for a long time, Harry, and you don't just get to do one job and, like, wipe the slate clean. The fact of the matter is, basically, in the Jewish faith, he's like Jewish, and it's like, my nana raises like a Motino religious, household, and so basically this is part of the redemption aspect. Like, this is about Harry's redemption. I think it's not just for him. I think probably it's like a redemption for a lot of other characters, maybe in some shape or form as well. But I like that kind of being like, okay, so that's where we're getting, at least for now, it's kind of, showcasing that this is where we're getting the titling from the episode from. But the fact is that, like, he points to Elliot. You look at that man, like, he saved hundreds of lives over the past 12 years. And when he wakes up every day, you know what he says? I've got more to do. Because that's been a core aspect of Elliot's story, is like the fact he's done a lot that he's not proud of. And he's doing everything he can every day to, like, make up for that. And it's like, so for Harry, he's like, the work, do the work, Harry. It's not done. You're having begun, but you're on your pathway to redemption. This isn't the end. This is the start, Harry. And then, Harry's like, he's right. He's not wrong. And then I love the line from Sophie, he's his father's son. I'm like, oh, that's super sweet. But yeah, it turns out your boy Maxwell is on the run. It's like, well, yeah, because there's also the aspect of, like, his family, like, where he comes from, his money situation kind of comes from his family as well. But it's like, right, Harry knows where he's going to be, and it's like, right, he's got some money in Panama that could make it so he can disappear. So it's like, right, I guess we're going to Panama. And Sophie's like, yeah, it was supposed to be just one job, but job's not done. And so they go, and as she's kind of looking at a ring, and she smiles, because that was the whole thing of, like, Nate, like in the first episode, and then at the beginning of season 2, it's like, no, it's supposed to just be one job. It's like, every time you leave, they just keep pulling you back in, So I love that. So honestly, a great fun start. Like I said, it's a little sad in many different regards, but I'm very excited. I'm curious, are we going to see is this going to get carried over into the next episode? I'm not knowing anything, or is this Maxwell thing going to get dealt with, like, in between this episode and next episode? I'm curious to see how the structure of this kind of ends up playing out. Because the show is very naturally, like, in many regards, some of the seasons had overarching stories, but a lot of them were just kind of like the character's overarching story, not necessarily like the show itself having. It's just usually like episode by episode, case by case type of thing, case of the week type of thing, which isn't a bad thing. It's a very good thing, but it all kind of lends itself a lot of times to, like, being like, it seems like with the Blythe thing, we are setting, but that might just be an Elliot overarching story, whether that ends up being part of the overarching, we'll have to wait and see. But obviously we've set up a lot, set up stuff with Harry, Elliot, Sophie, some stuff with Hardison. I mean, obviously, we know his sister is going to be a part of this story, so I think that's where things are going to play a role there. But I'm also curious about Parker as well. Like, once again, are we going to see her, like, going forward, like, slide more into the mastermind role, which I feel like she was kind of set up to fill that role, but maybe it's just supposed to represent the fact is Nate handled things his way and Parker handles them differently. Like, so maybe that's what that's trying to get across. But either way, I'm very, very excited to continue watching. Like I do with most of these things that get dropped at once, I'm going to release these all at once, so I have no idea when this is actually going to go up. But I will release these all, try to at least release them all within like 15, 30 minutes within each other. Like, I have a lot. Like I said, I'm getting started on this so late. This might not go up until Friday because I do have other reviews to do. So once again, that's a me issue, not really you. But like, when you're hearing this, do know like the rest of the episodes are going to be coming up later today, all of them, or this is well into the future and they're already all up. So so just kind of letting you know that ahead of time. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Once again, I do apologize because I went on a lot of tangents this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.